everybody, it is Dean Z speaking to you from my anonymous hotel room as I am traveling around for recruiting visits to different schools. I know this is not going to get me 10 out of 10 on Room Rater, and it has slight hostage video vibes going on, but you know, I am dedicated to you guys, and so here I am. I want to do an app reading today. I have not read any actual applications yet this season because I'm doing recruiting, but I thought this would be a good opportunity to talk about one particular kind of application that I get a lot of questions about, and it's what some of you call, I think, like extreme splitters or something like that. So it's someone who, you know, there's two metrics. There's an LSAT and there's a GPA. So it's someone with either a very high LSAT and very low GPA, or very high GPA, very low LSAT. And I want to start out by saying both of those can make great law students. I speak to you as a former splitter myself. And I used to have a colleague who also went to Michigan Law School who was a splitter in the other direction. I was a high LSAT, low GPA. He was a high GPA, low LSAT. And we used to debate about this because he would say he just thought that the high LSAT, low GPA people were no good. And I would say, pardon me, we are. But I also like the high GPA, low LSAT people, you know, but it's all, you know, it's not about the numbers, it's particularly in this case, right? It's about everything that goes along with it. So I looked for people who had LSATs at or above our medians, and then GPAs of 3.45 and below, because that was what my GPA was, 3.45. And so it's about me. And I did it from a couple seasons ago. So then I interestingly, I had a number to choose among. I noticed though that about 2/3 of the people we admitted in this category accepted our offer. And usually it's about 40% of people overall are accepting our offer. So the fact that it's 2/3 in this category tells me something. That tells me that the people in this category are not getting in to as many schools as people in some other categories. And I want to try and help with that because I think there are some real commonalities for the people who jump out and appeal to an admissions officer. So let's see if I can't assist in helping you jump out that way. Okay. All right. And I will also say this, as I picked four people who didn't enroll at Michigan to look at closely. And then I thought all of them had different, they had some commonalities and they had different lessons to learn. So I'm going to try to, instead of really going in depth in one, I'm going to try to go quickly through four, and we will see how that goes. Wish me luck. Here we go. Right. This first candidate is I'll just tell you what his numbers were to begin with. He took the LSAT twice. His high score was 175, so that is very high. His average score was a 171, which is our median, or it was in the year that he was applying. And his cumulative GPA was a 3.45. He graduated 5 years before he actually was applying to law school. He graduated from undergrad 5 years before he was applying. He went to a very large private institution, like a solid institution, not, you know, tippy top kind of school, but, you know, very solid. And he majored in mechanical engineering. So keep all that in mind. Now, what jumps out to me about this guy? So first of all, you know, I'm looking at his resume right now. He has been working as an engineer since he graduated, and he's worked at a couple different places, including as a civilian employee of the military. I won't tell you what branch, but he was working as an engineer in the military for 3 years, and then he went into the private sector and he worked at a couple different places, more short-term at those places. He tells me, you know, he lists his education underneath his work experience on his resume. Doesn't tell me anything he did in college, like no activities. And so that, that's like, oh, I don't love that. I wish I knew. As you know, I if you've watched any of these before, I like to know all the, what the judge I used to clerk for called the music and perfume about a person. And so I don't know that here. But then he tells me a lot about his skills, that he has a high security clearance, that he knows all kinds of engineering things that I don't know what they mean. So he didn't need to tell me that. But then at the very bottom, he has a little thing saying he was the president of his school's improv club. So I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Here's an engineer who's into improv. I like that. And that, in fact, is what he devotes his personal statement to. He talks all about how he started getting involved in improv and how much he enjoyed it and what the skills it has given him. And, and he talks about how, frankly, how successful he has been at it, but he does it in a very non-braggy way, which is good. So he just mentions that he was one of 3 selected out of a large number who had applied for this improv troupe, and how much he enjoyed it, and how he soldiered on even, for one show after he had sort of a small medical emergency, and he went and did improv that night. And he talks about what a great gift it has been and all the skills it has given him. It's a really good essay. And then he also includes a GPA addendum, talking about basically, how the grades in engineering are lower than in many other disciplines, and that, and how while the things he's learned in engineering are very valuable to being a lawyer, such as, analytical skills and efficiency and methodologies and stuff, it is also, so he says he has a great perspective on solving problems, but also that the grades may not be as indicative of his success in law school, both because they're on the whole lower in that field, and because they're not, it's like a lot of math and science and stuff that isn't directly relevant to law school. That's a pretty good case that he's making there. And now we will look at his resume, his transcript. I'm just going to look at it a little bit quickly, not super closely, but I can see he has basically all B's and A's, 1 C+ in some kind of fancy calculus. So, it's, B's and A's will often add up to 3.45. So it's nothing really tragic here. It's just, it is, B's bring down your GPA. So I don't really have a lot of concerns looking at that transcript quickly. And then he has letters of rec, one from a professor, which in undergrad, which is an okay letter, doesn't say a lot, which is, to be very honest, kind of typical for engineering professors. They're maybe not the greatest at writing letters of rec that law schools want to see. But I'm impressed that he has been in touch with this professor this long, and the professor remembers him and is speaking positively, although not in great detail. And then he also includes a letter of rec from one of his employers when he was in the, civilian in the military. So, and that one is also very positive. So that's number 1. Our second candidate also took the LSAT 2 times, got one. The high score is exactly at our median, a 171. The first score was a 162, so the average is a 167. The GPA is a 3.27. And he went to a large public institution, a very solid one. Not University of Michigan, but one that I kind of think of as being like University of Michigan, I'll say that. And he was a math major, and he graduated 7 years. I can do math. 7 years before he applied to law school. All right, what jumps out at me about this? Okay, this candidate had graduated from undergrad, and while in undergrad worked at a pizza store the whole time. And then after graduating, took that pizza store and it looks like he expanded it and opened it in another location, and now he is co-founder of this pizza store. He also works on the side as a property manager, or he seems to have done that consistently too. So this is really interesting. This is someone who's very entrepreneurial, and great customer service experience to run a pizza store and to expand it. And in fact, I see that one of the things he lists on his resume is that he took customer service training from Zingerman's, which is a store in Ann Arbor it's a deli, and it's a whole bunch of businesses that relate to the deli, including one of the businesses they have is that they do customer training for different companies, and it's a really great program. So I'm like, all right, he is very high level in terms of customer service. I also see on his resume that he has volunteered for about 1.5 years for a group that works with children in the court process, in the criminal justice process. So he's clearly, trying to get himself exposed to law, which I think is terrific. His personal statement, it combines two different themes. One, he's talking about how when he got to his undergrad institution after being, top of his class in high school, he was quite shocked by how much harder it was in college. And he talks about how he didn't perform well as a result. But then he also talks about how, as he's not performing well, he gets solicited to work for this pizza company, and there he finds a great deal of satisfaction and describes the skills he's gotten from this business and how he thinks those will serve him well in law school. He also includes an optional essay about why he wants to go to Michigan, and mentions his experience with Zingerman's, actually, so I like that, because I picked it out at the beginning and now it's followed up with here, so that makes me feel smart. And how he's coming to law school with a family, and he thinks Ann Arbor would be a great place for him. Although, I will note, as I said at the outset, he didn't actually enroll, so oh well. And then now looking at his transcript quickly, as with the first candidate, there is nothing particularly alarming here. It's really, there's a couple of C's on here, but mostly it is a mix of A's and B's. And again, he was a math major, so I don't find the lower grades in math courses to be particularly concerning, because as with mechanical engineering, I know that the curve is lower there, grades tend to be lower, and these are really hard courses that don't have a lot of direct applicability to law school. So and again, it's not dramatically bad grades or anything like that. It's not like a bunch of D's and W's throughout here. It's pretty kind of understandably not tippy-top grades, but nothing too concerning, honestly. He has a letter of rec from the chief executive officer of the company that he is now, part owner of, and he also has a very, and that one's okay. That's, again, someone who probably doesn't really know what kind of letters law schools are looking for, but it's positive. And then he has a very detailed, very strong letter from the volunteer organization he works for, and then another letter from someone at the pizza store. So, okay, that's another kind of application. Okay, next. This candidate took the LSAT twice, and they were both very good scores. So, but one was just slightly below median, 169, and one was 175. So now, very strong. His GPA is the lowest of the four in this group. It's a 3.01, and he was an English major. So unlike these math and mechanical engineering people, this is just straight up law kind of courses, or pre-law, traditional pre-law types of courses. And he went to another public university, and a very good one. And another one that I think of, it's not Michigan, but it's sort of one that I think of as being like Michigan. Now, okay, what do we know about this fellow? I'm going through his application, and now where is his, here is his resume. So his job is the one job of this group that is very law related. He works for a public defender. He has worked at this public defender, oh, I forgot to say, he graduated 4 years before the time of his application. He has worked for this public defender for 3 of those 4 years. And then before that, you kind of have to look really hard to figure out what he was doing, because he lists lots of information, understandably, about the public defender, and it shows how, as a paralegal, he has moved through the ranks of the public defender in this time, so he's clearly being valued and appreciated by his employer. It's like, all right, well, what did he do in the year between graduating and starting this job? And he has it just listed in like additional employment at the very end of his resume. And I'll just say I don't love that, because it was hard to figure out. And he worked for a contractor in the immediate aftermath of graduating. But he also tells me that he's very outdoorsy. He tells me some things he likes to do. He's a surfer, climber, fly fisher, hiker. It also tells me that he won an award in his undergraduate community, and I'm not going to tell you the name of it, because I assume that would make him quite identifiable, but it was an award for basically being kind of a good person, I will call it, and that gets my attention. Like, all right, that's he clearly, I know that he's done, did not do well in college in terms of his grades, but he's clearly someone who was part of the community, who was known, and who was well liked. So, all right, that is interesting. His personal statement is terrific. It's really good. He starts out with this sort of self-deprecating story of an interaction he had with a juvenile client at the public defender, and how bad he was, frankly, at interacting with this person, and how much he has learned since this early interaction. And very, I would say very compellingly talks about his work at this organization, and how inspiring it has been for him, and why he wants to go into practicing law. Now, you don't have to talk in your essay about what it is you definitely want to do when you practice law, but if you have something like this person does that has been extremely motivating to you, and is easily articulated as being your motivation to go to law school, and it's something you actually know a fair amount about at this point, because he's been working in for a public defender for 3 years and now wants to be a public defender, I think that's a great thing to write about. It is not necessary, but if you have it, it can make a really, really powerful personal statement, and this one is. Then he also includes an essay, which might be called in shorthand a diversity essay. So he talks about, in this essay, how he is the child of divorced parents, and he grew up with one parent who lived in a very wealthy community, worked as a professional, and then the other parent was working class, did not have a lot of money, and grew up in a very poor community. And it's very interesting as he talks about going between these two communities, and what he had learned, and the lack of respect that people were treated with in the when he was with the parent who was in the poor community. And I really liked this essay. It was very nuanced and really gave me a good glimpse of who this person is. And then finally he includes a very brief addendum that I thought at first was going to be about why he got, very poor grades, but it wasn't. It was just, it's an essay about character and fitness, actually, about how he was placed on probation because his grades were so bad in one semester that he was in danger of failing out. He had a 1.8 in one particular semester. And, but then he gives me another essay, and that one is about why those grades were the way they were. And he's very honest. He talks about how he basically wasted his first couple of years at college. He just didn't appreciate what he had, and he was sort of partying a lot and goofing around and not mature is how I would put it. He doesn't specifically say that, but that is how I would say it. And then he has an opportunity in his third year to study abroad. And during that study abroad experience, he saw a lot of inequality on a global scale. And that he felt both anger and frustration about that, but then it also made him grow up a bit. And he realized, I have this incredible privilege to be at this great school, and I am blowing it. And he says, after that, I never got a grade below a B. All right, let's see if that's true. Okay, here's his transcript. And indeed, unlike the other two candidates I've already talked about, he has some truly terrible grades, lots of D's and C's in his first 2 years. And now we see study abroad, and then he comes back and wow, all A's. So he doesn't get anything below a B, that is true, but in fact, he's sort of undersold himself. He's getting almost all A's, including some A pluses. And just a couple of B's. So, all right, so I really buy the account he has of himself, which is important. So if you're going to explain, here's what happened in undergrad, you've got to make sure it holds together. I will tell you that for my own part, I thought about writing an addendum about why I did badly in school, but I honestly couldn't really come up with a coherent explanation that made it all tie together. Other than just being not mature. It wasn't that I was even partying. My mother died when I was in college, so that certainly affected my grades. But, honestly, they were kind of bad before my mother got sick, and they were kind of bad even a year after she died. So I didn't write it because it couldn't make it hang together. But sometimes people will try to put a story together about why their grades were bad, and then you look at the transcript and it doesn't hang together, and then you've just lost all credibility. So be very careful about that. I think it is great to provide an explanation like this, but it has to be accurate. Okay, and now I'm looking at letters of rec. One is from his employer that sort of charmingly starts "Dear Persons," which is not common. I've not seen that typically, but I thought it was cute. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But this jumps off the page at me. This recommender says, this candidate is one of the best, if not the best, paralegal that I've ever worked with in my entire career, and goes on in great detail about why that is, about his smarts and his talents, and also how well he works with other people in the school. And it is a really rave review. And then the next letter is from undergrad, from a professor who still remembers him, and also writing an excellent letter of rec. And then the third one is another one from a volunteer organization that I didn't mention, but he works as a volunteer, also a rave. So that's that's the trifecta there. You've got employer, you've got a professor, and you've got volunteer experience, and they are all rave reviews. All right, I've saved the best for last, because this of all of these this person does everything basically perfectly, I would say. But I wanted to show you the others to say, even if you don't do everything perfectly, you can still get in. with these variation in scores. So this candidate goes to another public institution. It is not the strongest public institution, honestly. It's I'd say good, not great. But he majored in physics and also got a master's in education. And he has been working for 10 years as a physics teacher in a couple different schools, and also doing some tutoring on the side, and but pretty consistently working as a physics teacher in high school, which obviously, because elementary students do not study physics. So that is pretty impressive to me. And he's been at the, at one school he was at 6 years, and one school he's been at 3 years. So impressive. And also includes a little information about what he did before he was a teacher, which in some detail, which I like, because unlike the other candidate where I had to figure out what were you doing, this makes it very clear. And he both worked as sort of an admin assistant for the physics department where he went to school, which tells me they liked him. So his grades may not have been fantastic, but they thought he was a good student because they employed him. And then he also worked in a nursing home, and he worked as the admin. He worked there for 3 years, like basically the whole time he was majoring. And also gives me some skills and interests, and so I can see that he is an athlete, he's a big runner, he's also a musician, and he also mentions, this kind of leapt out at me, that he's a volunteer for a program taking youth on outdoor experiences. So I thought, well, that's nice. That's kind of a big commitment to make. And then his personal statement is about that experience, and it is so good, you guys. It is basically exactly what I think people should do when they're writing the personal statement. He thought about, what is it about me that I want an admissions office to know, and then what illustrates that about me. So he's talking about his experience in this volunteer position, and how much it has taught him about persevering. He tells a little story about one particular difficult episode on a hike, and how they all pushed through it, and how far he's come in 10 years. His high school and college self would never recognize himself now. He had not been prepared for college. He'd done really well in really well in high school, and just hadn't been prepared for the level of rigor that was going to go with being a physics major. And then how the 10 years being a teacher, and then also this volunteer experience has taught him a lot about being a servant, in a service profession, and how that has led him to law school. It is great essay. And then he also includes an essay about, again, it's a diversity essay about being a teacher, and how challenging it is, and how much he has learned from it, and how it's not at all repetitive, though, of the personal statement, which is important. He's giving me new information, and he talks about the need to work with, to bring people into physics who aren't traditionally there, that is to say women and people of color. He's a white man, so he talks about not centering himself, and serving as a mentor for different students, and making sure they're feeling included. And it's just it's a great tone. It isn't I don't, sometimes when people are talking about helping people from different communities, they can sound very condescending. They can sound very like sort of patting themselves on the back for their own service and that sort of thing. And the tone here is great. He doesn't sound like that at all. And then finally, he includes an essay that is all about what happened in undergrad, and it's an essay, not an addendum. It's an essay we have about obstacles, sort of like some obstacle that you may have overcome, or at least I don't think we still have that essay, but we did at the time that he applied. And it talks about how he wasn't prepared for college. He's first gen. He just really didn't understand what he was getting into. And it is, and then he also points out that in his non-physics classes, he did very well. And again, excellent job on that. And so now I'm gonna look quickly at his transcript too, and I can see that he is, again, being totally accurate, that it's mostly A's and B's, so again, nothing too dramatically bad. But to the extent he had any C's, that was in physics and not in his other classes. And now I can't actually remember. I don't think I even told you what his LSAT and GPA are. His LSAT this is the problem of doing 4 at once. His LSAT is at our median, and his GPA is a 3.4. And then he has letters of rec just from his employers, which is totally understandable here because he graduated 10 years ago. So not surprised that he wasn't able to get letters from people who taught him 10 years ago at this public institution. All right, so let's pull this all together. What are some commonalities? One, if you have a high LSAT, low GPA, and you've been in a STEM kind of field, that's a great reason for a school to overlook your grades. But if you're not, there is still help. We saw the English major in there, and he was the one with the lowest grades overall. What else did we learn? We learned taking some distance. I think this is the single most important thing you could do if your particular situation is that you have high LSAT, low GPA, is getting some distance from those grades, finding time to work and find success in another arena, and then being able to say, I have changed a lot since then. That is, whether that is 3 years away or 10 years away, that will make a huge difference in terms of making an admissions office think, I don't know that I have anything to worry about here. Third, the particular pattern of your grades might matter, and if you have a great explanation for why they are the way they are, by all means provide that, but make sure it is accurate. And then in terms of employment, we saw lots of different kinds of employment. There is not one thing that you have to do to illustrate that you are now ready to be a serious student. It could be law related, or it could be completely non-law related. So just finding something, but all of them have found success in their chosen endeavors, and I think that is great. And then I would say some of them, didn't write extra essays, and some of them did. I would say especially if you have something that you are hoping that is going to be a weakness in your application, like one low metric, give it all you got, baby. Like, write an extra essay or two. Show everything about yourself that you can. Now, it can work out without doing that, but I just think that's the smart way to approach this. All right. I think that is all I have to say about this kind of applicant, and I hope that's been useful. Let me know what you think of this. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below, or email us at law.jd.admissions@umich.edu. Thanks to Dustin Johnston, who's going to have to pull this all together, and who's probably not going to like the layout here, but all right. And wherever you go, go blue.